Hi, Nikki. Thank you for coming on the Peace, Love, and Awareness podcast. And I think we're all excited to hear you share your near death experience. And I'll just kind of let you, if you want to start that day or give a little background, I'll let you decide.
Okay, sure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I guess to start, people should know I was very, very ill, but here in America, health insurance is expensive. So it started with a broken healthcare system. I had untreated pneumonia, so I had been very ill. I knew that it was getting pretty bad, but because I didn't yet have health insurance, I was trying to treat it like over the counter with a lot of over the counter medication. And I believe it was a drug interaction with over counter and some of my more herbal stuff. But it started with really, I just felt extremely tired out of nowhere. And I can't describe the type of fatigue. And also, I was freezing cold. And I just kept thinking, like, I'm so tired. I can't even possibly stay awake. And a voice in my head telling me, like, do not fall asleep. I do remember the whole process of dying because I know that I was looking at my phone and trying to stay awake. And it started with what almost seemed like glitching. Like my eyes started glitching weird, almost how you imagine a computer to glitch. And my
Wow.
vision kind of went black. And at first I thought, I'm just so tired, I can't keep my eyes open. And it was almost like the senses would go like one by one. With the last one going was my hearing. And I remember it was really, really loud. And all I could hear was it sounded like crying, which I think was me, but I couldn't really feel my body at that point. So I didn't really know. And it immediately started with, I call it like the void, where it was just literally nothing. And all I could hear was me crying almost in my head, kind of echoing all around. And then it immediately started these, I call them like simulations, but to me, it felt like it was a real life thing. And there were multiple, where it was essentially my two worst fears and my biggest blocks, I would say, in this life to me evolving further were in multiple different simulations over and over. It started with, I have this fear that I will be alone forever or being just completely alone. And that was one of the first simulations that happened where I was, in fact, the only living thing, consciousness that ever existed. And that's why it kind of moved fluidly, starting with this void to all of a sudden me having this realization I'm the only living being in the entire universe. Like nothing else was alive. It was still very much a black nothingness.
Did you know who you were, or as far as like family members, did you remember
No, it
like
was
your
like I
life?
was living completely different things, but I did remember kind of parts of each prior simulation because they almost blended together.
Hmm.
But these simulations, so the loneliness one eventually advanced to being the first being ever to an apocalypse almost where everyone I knew was dead. I was the last living human being on earth. And it would play out as if it were real life. And I had this whole backstory and I know exactly what happened. And I remember watching a video on hearing about a chemical bomb. And so me believing my whole family was dead, everyone in the world was dead, I somehow lived, which made sense in this simulation because to me it was a very real thing. It felt like years. And
I have
these
never heard
stories,
that one before.
I know, and I don't know if it's because, I kind of call this hell. And that's what I tell people. I
Yeah,
was like, this is hell, in my opinion, your worst fears.
it's your
Because
version of hell.
yeah, because if you're not afraid, I'm not afraid of a pit of fire and a goat man. So why that would not be hell for me. I would be sitting there going, this is interesting and very hot and uncomfortable. But to me, that is not fear. Being the only living being is terrifying.
That
Thinking
is,
everyone I know is dead is terrifying.
yeah, I agree.
And these simulations did not end. This storyline kept playing out until I felt every single emotion that I could feel in that real life scenario And I got to a place of surrendering completely to it and accepting it. And it was no longer a fear. So it was very intense.
And so what was the other scenario?
The other fear was essentially kind of stems from my self-doubt in this lifetime, which is that I had gone crazy, like losing my actual sanity, not knowing what's real, thinking I am the only crazy one. And that's how these simulations kind of transitioned, because it transitioned out of loneliness into self-doubt or thinking I'm crazy, but almost piggybacked off each scenario. So the one where I was the only living being, it was, well, I went crazy because I was the only living consciousness. So I created my whole life in my head, and none of this is real. My kids aren't real. Like, the world didn't end. I'm just literally living as a consciousness because I went crazy being the only living thing in the entire universe. Like, they
So
piggyback off of each other.
were you like on Earth or were you in space? Like where were you alone at?
I describe it, and I've heard this term where it's like an oversoul. Like, I felt what it was like to not be human and to be a consciousness existing in essentially nothingness.
Wow.
And that's
Wow.
why I only know how to call it a void, is because I don't know how. There's not words yet maybe in existence that can describe that. So I don't have the words to describe it, other than I was aware that I was this oversoul consciousness, not any ego identity, not any memories. And that's how it was kind of able to trickle down into each scenario.
That's fascinating.
Yes. Feeling like I lost my mind, though, not fascinating. But again, these simulations, because they were able to almost piggyback off, I still had no idea that I had actually died, because each one felt very real. And it was almost as if I had amnesia to what had just happened until later, because, then there was the scenario where, everyone in the world died, which I convinced myself, oh no, my kids died. And I created this whole scenario of being the only consciousness and this whole thing, because I went crazy and I'm really in a padded room right now. And so I felt, and I remember feeling like the worst grief I can ever describe. I only remember kind of hearing say like, no, 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 please, please, multiple times in my head, where I'm like just begging for this to stop, because I can't describe the fear and pain that I was inflicted with in that scenario, in each one.
Yeah, I can agree, as a parent, losing your children is like the worst fear. And then being the only one that's, the only being in existence. I find it fascinating that you didn't necessarily experience, being the only person as a human on Earth, but really as in like your true essence of a being.
It started as that, but I did have a simulation where I was the only human on Earth. There was like an apocalypse. So
Wow.
there were multiple of the same two fears. And I didn't remember all of them until the end of it. While they were happening, they each felt like a totally individual real life thing. And it wasn't until I felt everything that you could feel out of that, and I finally surrendered to it, where I was like, well, this just is what it is. And I like was just in total acceptance of this existence in each simulation, that they stopped. And then it was the tunnel, like being pulled towards the white light.
Okay, so you stopped resisting.
Yeah, it wasn't until I surrendered. And after I processed the whole experience, I was like, that makes sense. Because if you think about what faith is and what they do, preach in the Bible, it's trusting in God and Jesus and believing in them, even if you have no proof, no evidence. And that is exactly what surrendering is it's just, you're giving up control. You're giving up control. You're not trying to control any outcome. You're not trying to prove things in existence. You just accept it as it is, because you have that faith that that's what it is. And so, because I had a lot of resistance and I struggled with lack of faith in myself, that's why I believe self-doubt and going crazy manifested as this hell experience, because I didn't accept faith in this human life, in myself. I had faith in the universe, but I didn't have faith in myself. I constantly doubted myself and if what I remembered was real. I gaslit myself essentially. So that was so important for my own spiritual beliefs and validating how much we are our own God, because I still went to hell even though I had faith in God and the universe, but I didn't have it in myself. So then I went to hell and had this experience until I stopped doubting and had that same faith in myself.
Were you aware of a God or like a higher being as far as like when you surrendered, or it was just kind of like the mindset of it is what it is?
I wasn't aware at that time when these simulations were happening. It was just accepting that if this is my life where I'm going to be feeling pain and despair forever, then it just is what it is. Like I'm not resisting it. I'm not pleading and begging for it to stop. I'm not fighting it. I just accepted it. So I think that had a lot to do with kind of giving up that control, because if you can accept that, your life in this case is just going to be hell, you're not fighting it. And then that fear goes away because you've accepted it. There's nothing to fear if you've already accepted it. And hell, I don't believe, can exist without fear.
Absolutely. So what was your experience with the light? Did you, see any other beings like a lot of people experience, or what was that like when you did surrender?
So I had the one experience that I think almost every NDE I've heard of people have, where it's like a tunnel to a white light. Like I had that experience. And then I was surrounded by a whitish, kind of very light blue light. It was so warm when I had been freezing cold this entire experience before. And it was just this golden feeling of love where I just felt so much peace. And I felt just so I don't know if tranquility is a deep enough of a word for that. It was almost as if nothing could ever harm you. Nothing bad existed. It was just pure light and love. And I didn't see a figure like some have described. I heard a voice that kind of surrounded me. And I was very aware that it was a higher consciousness. I call it God, but it's just semantics. God, universe, creator, demiurge. I like demiurge because it sounds fancy, but I think that too manifests in the way that people believe it manifests here, since we do create our own reality. We are our own God. And so to me, it was a voice and a light and a feeling. Once I got to this white light, I know that I had conversations with God, but it went very quickly into a life review, which a lot of people with NDEs talk about, where you're watching your life play back.
Mm-hmm.
And this was leading up to where I finally realized I died, because at this point, I still had no idea that I actually died. Like, to me, I'm having just these experiences, and they're so intense that I don't really understand what's even happening. I am just in it. They're so present.
Wow.
Yeah, you're so present that you're not actually thinking, you just are. And I think that's a
So-
part of the afterlife. You don't think and process because your brain has died with your physical body. You're just a consciousness. So there isn't any wonder what this is all about. What's happening right now? This is really odd. It was just being.
That's interesting that you say that, because even though you weren't aware that you were dead, you still experienced hell or your version of it in the tunnel and then the life review, even though
Yeah.
you weren't aware that you were dead.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
not aware until the life review. And that's
And
when
what
I
was
was
that
able to
like?
like,
What
what was
was
that?
that like? The life review? Is it like I hear some people say that it's like watching a TV or like a panoramic view, or what was that experience like, your life review?
Yeah, it was as if I was in the memory, but watching it like as if you were a ghost, you know? So it wasn't like on a screen, but I was like still watching it from a third party view.
Yeah.
Each memory I had, and it almost went by person and almost in matter of importance. That's how I remember it. And once I had kind of these memories with these certain people, it almost dissolved and went away, and I forgot who they were. It was when it got to my children that's when I kind of gone, like when I started to forget my children, and they were dissolving in front of me, and I'm being pulled away. I get emotional on this part. I'm being like literally pulled away from them. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm forgetting my son. Like, where is he going? It's literally like there's smoke in your hands. And
Panic.
it was when that happened that after I like didn't know who my son was, I knew like I could feel it happening. It's like each memory was going away and I was like starting to forget, but I knew how painful that was. And then when it got to my daughter, who's my oldest, that's when I like just said, no, like I can't, I felt so much energy. It was like a force. And the only way I can describe it is that I was so resistant and mad at that point. And I was like, absolutely not. Is this happening? That's when I kind of realized I died. And I was almost whooshed back into my human body, but I was not tethered in. And I was 100% in between worlds. Like,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I was not completely in my body. I know that I tried to grab my phone and I couldn't. And I just remember thinking, like, this is weird. Like, but at the same time, I was so panicked. And also, to note, I felt like I had to go to the bathroom really bad trying to get back in my body. Like, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go all over myself if I don't go to the bathroom. And so there was that. And also starting to realize what was happening, because now I remembered the whole experience and realized like, oh my God, I just died. I need to get in my body. And then the only way I can describe it is it was so heavy. My dogs could not see me. My cat was staring at me like I was psychotic, and I couldn't grab my phone. I remember thinking like, I feel so heavy, and sometimes my arm would feel heavy and then it would whoosh up. And then I remember just trying to get to the bathroom because I was like, I have to go to the bathroom. And feeling so many emotions because I was now realizing I just died. I'm trying to get my body. And I was standing in the bathroom and I look up at the mirror and I am surrounded by shadow figures, which I've never seen in my life. My daughter, I've heard other people having the experience. I've never seen shadow people. And they weren't, this sounds so weird because they weren't human sized shadow people. And usually shadow people in this 3D, I guess, are very human shaped. They weren't. They were much taller and much longer and not as much a human shape. I don't know how to describe that because they were kind of huddled around me. And even though I could not hear anything, I knew they were basically telling me I couldn't be there and that I needed to like go back to where I was before. And I remember like yelling at them, like, I'm not gonna go back. And I remember trying to like run away from them. And that's when I felt my body kind of like go down again. I believe I collapsed. There was puke on my floor in that spot the next day. So I think I was able to get in my body somewhat before I collapsed again and went back to the white light.
What was your feeling when you first went into the bathroom and you saw these shadow beings? Was it fear or what was the feeling?
It was very scary, but I wasn't scared of them as much as I was that I knew this isn't human and I know I'm somewhere I'm not. I kept feeling like I'm not supposed to be here and that they almost not scolding, but kind of like they were really there to be very stern, like you're not supposed to be here. And so
as
I
far
wasn't
as back in your human body?
Yeah, like because I wasn't fully back in my body. I feel like I was where ghosts go.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember thinking, I'm a ghost. What? Like at some point I remember thinking, oh my God, I think I'm a ghost because I remember when I couldn't grab my phone that was weird and it reminded me of the actual movie Ghost. Because There's shadow people in that movie too. I just realized that.
So the shadow people, were they dark?
Yeah, like they were pitch black.
And did they have like arms and legs?
They were circled around me, so I couldn't tell. I do remember that I knew there were spots where there would have been eyes, but I don't remember because it was just so dark and I was
Okay.
struggling so bad to be in my body.
And did they say anything else other than like you're not supposed to be here?
No, and it's not even like I never heard those words. It was like a feeling. Like I knew that's what they were telling me, I guess, in a sense.
It's like a telepathic communication kind of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was like really strong in my core where I knew. So I wasn't, I mean, they were frightening. The experience was frightening, but I was more determined to not go back because I didn't know where they were going to take me. Am I going to go back to this hell experience and do this whole thing over? Or am I going back to the white light? Like, I had no idea. I just knew they were going to take me somewhere.
Wow. So you were
Yeah.
never really given an option to go back or stay. You just kind of felt like a longing for your family and went back to your body.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember just
Wow.
like, I don't know. It felt almost like I was pushed backwards, but it's what's, if I could be real vulnerable, I didn't want to come back ever. I only came back because I didn't want to forget my kids and I love them. I would have rather stayed there than be back here. It's a feeling that,
A lot of people say it feels like home.
yeah, yeah, it feels like you've searched for it your whole life. And it feels like
Where you
how I'm
belong.
sure, yeah, I'm sure how it would feel if you've never experienced maybe pain or trauma, or at least you have and it's fully healed.
Hmm.
So,
Just like total bliss and contentment.
yeah, I wanted to be there.
That's interesting. It's kind of scary when you think about, reincarnation or living multiple lives, or you know, s- you know, time doesn't really exist. And so ultimately that means that there are no past lives, but we're living multiple lives at once, pretty much. So it's
Yeah,
kind of scary when you think about, as a human, your ego, your attachments, and you think about leaving this life behind because you have such strong attachments to, like, specifically your family or your children. Like, you have to, like they say, there's a veil of forgetfulness when you're born. So it's almost scary to think, do you forget all that there is in this life when you go to the next one?
that's what it felt like because I remember, so when the first white light experience happened during my life review, at some point, when the other memories of other people were fading away, I was aware that
Mhm.
I forgot who they were, and that, but I was so okay with it because of the presence of this feeling being there. It didn't, and again, you're so present. I'm not thinking, oh, are my kids next? No, you're just there existing. So it wasn't until my son came, and then I'm so blissful in these memories with my son. And it wasn't until I remember like touching his face and him dissolving away, and then me realizing, oh, like I'm losing memory of him because I'm able to finally go like, oh, I don't like this. So
Wow.
I think my dedication to them, which actually is a huge reason I have stayed alive on earth as long as I have, was for my children, not because I wanted to be here. And so I
Mhm.
think that outweighed my ability to want to feel good and be in this presence. Like I made a conscious choice. And since this was my universe, my reality, I chose in that moment. It's okay if I'm miserable for the rest of my human life. I would rather that than forget my kids. I'm not ready for this right now.
Yeah.
So I
That's
think,
really
yeah,
interesting that you didn't just experience, say, like one memory to the next. It's almost like you did your life review, but you're also, it's like the memories are leaving you as it's happening.
Yeah, yeah,
Completely leaving.
yeah. And
It's like your memory, the whole slate's being wiped clean type of thing.
yeah. And you feel so good in comparison that when I was losing everyone else and everything else, I was okay with it. I was like, yeah, this is it. Yeah, great. I
Almost like letting go of baggage type of thing.
Yeah, because where I was at in my human life when this happened, I wanted to die. I didn't want to be alive because I thought after all the therapy and all the healing and all the spirituality that it would make life better. And it didn't. It made life more difficult because I was so much more aware and not naive.
Mhm.
And that sucked. When you live with rose-colored glasses on your whole life and you take them off and you realize the world is not the beautiful picture you painted in your head, that's horrible. That was a big part of why my self-doubt got so bad, because I was like, I have literally gaslit myself and blinded myself my entire life, and this is how the world really is. This is how people really are, and it's not the fantasy you create in your head. So the feeling that I felt there was what I always wanted to feel here, and felt like I was getting further and further away from it. And so it was like, it was just a peace. It was a rest. Like I was just so freaking tired of being a human. I couldn't, I had so much resentment to living. So oddly
Um,
enough, manifestation's powerful.
I'd like to ask you, after your experience, were you able to immediately recall your near-death experience, or did it take time for you to remember it?
Well, so after the shadow people, I actually went back to the white light. And it's
Oh,
interesting you brought up past lives, because that came up then. I was
oh,
then, yeah, that was when I came back. I had a whole conversation with, you know, Demiurge God. And part of it, I know I'm not meant to remember, but the part that I do is that God basically told me that in every single lifetime, and then showed me every single lifetime. I don't remember all of them, but I do remember being born multiple times, because I remember the feeling on my cheeks because it was gross. Um, being born multiple times, and then showing me that every single time before I went here, I chose to come here. I knew exactly what was going to happen to me. Maybe not all the details, but I knew what pain or trauma, maybe not how it would happen, but what challenges I would face. And I chose to do it anyways. And I remember talking to God and saying, like, if he showed me before I came into this life everything I would experience. But when I was with my children, I was like, done. It outweighs it all. I will experience whatever. And I chose to come here. And that part really stuck with me. But that part wasn't the part that made me feel happy about coming here. I know that I had another conversation with God after that. Once I had that realization that I chose this, I know it
mhm.
was about the future, and I know it was about what I need to do. I do not remember all of the details. All I can say is that since this happened, I have had these feelings of, no, this is what I have to do. So one of them is, I got these immediate feelings the next day. I slept for 25 hours, by the way, after this happened, like literally 25 hours. So, and I'll talk
Wow.
about that. But once I like really kind of reflected on this and everything, I had a knowing, I suppose you could call it, a knowing of, okay, one thing you need to do is you need to call some female prisons, and you need to tell them that you want to talk to the inmates. And I'm like, well, why?
Wow.
Like, I don't do that. I don't like public speaking. I got a TikTok to share my readings and my knowledge because I work in mental health and I have certain specialties. And so I got that to challenge myself during my healing journey to get comfortable speaking and communicating to others, because it has been so uncomfortable for me my whole life. And so I have no idea what I'm supposed to talk about. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. I just know I have to do it. And they've given me, I say, this knowing of other things. Like just today I was driving and I was like, and this knowing came through where it was like, okay, you're going to call this exact eating disorder treatment center, and you're going to call them and tell them this, that you want to come in and talk to this group of people about this topic. And I was like,
Had you
we
ever
don't
heard
do
of that
this.
place before?
No, I've never done anything like this ever. I work one-on-one with clients. Like I have never done anything like that. So I just know I got to do it.
So did you remember when you woke up and you felt this, I guess, urge to contact the female prison? Was it to share your near-death experience, or just kind of like you just felt like you had to do it? You didn't know why.
I feel like I know I have to because I've had that specific one about the female prisoners since
Hmm.
the following 25 hours later, and because I kind of had that fear about it, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. It's getting more of an urge. It's getting to where I'm constantly thinking about it now, and it's really highlighting some of my own procrastination and self-sabotage. And it's kind of like opening up this other fear that maybe I didn't know that I had.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, but I feel like one, I did record a voice note to myself immediately after this happened. I also called multiple people because when I came back into my body after that time, I could not make sense of everything that happened because I like knew I died at some point, but then I was back. Like I remembered everything that just happened, but part of me was still like, well, what if that really happened? Like, what if I was really crazy? And what if everyone is dead? And then the fact that I called multiple people and nobody answered made me believe even more that people were dead. And so I finally got one friend on the phone and was able to talk it out. But I still didn't know that the hell that I experienced wasn't real. I still was not sure if someone died and I lost my mind. I told my friend on the phone that night, I think I lost someone. Like I think someone died and maybe I went crazy, and then maybe that led to me dying here and I don't remember it. It wasn't until I slept for 25 hours that I knew for sure, because I could understand it now that I was able to like reflect on it, and then I read to see if other people had experiences, and yeah.
So do you remember any of your past lives?
I feel like I had random images. I mostly remember being born multiple times. I have images, but no, the biggest part of this whole experience that I remember the least was with God. So I think because, and this is my own belief, I think because there is still, even though I do believe we're our own universe, I still believe that there is this oversoul and this original creator who created all of this. Because one thing I asked right away when I found other groups was I asked if any of them experienced being God and being the first living being, because I had this feeling that that very first memory in hell that I had of being the first living being and being aware of it, I remember thinking that's why I created all of these universes, and then which led to humans, is because I was so alone. And so I was so confused on whether if that was that God showing me how it all starts. Does everyone have that fear in the end? Did everyone experience that? I had no idea. But I think I heard from one other person who said I had that same exact experience where it was showing me really the first consciousness, because we all stem from the one consciousness. We all
Mm-hmm.
stem from God. It's like branches that kind of trickle down, that oversoul, and we're all a part of it. So we are also that original being. We're just a branch of it. So I think it was almost a memory.
Yeah, that's kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Wow. That reminds me of another thing. that I heard someone say that was really fascinating, that your imagination or memories is all it's already happened. It's your imagination is basically you remembering things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, like that they can be memories. Same with dreams. I've heard
And
about that
not
too.
even necessarily yours, but anyone's.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
if you look at a picture and you kind of like start with this oversoul that branches down, we're all connected. And that's
Hmm.
this whole spiritual concept of we are one. It's all connected. And it is. And so that alone mixed with the fact that I knew I chose to come here, which means
Hmm.
I know that I have and will already survive anything bad that happens to me. And I still did it because that's how good I knew it would be. That makes me,
Hmm.
have that acceptance of, well, I've already done this. So really, what's hard now? I've also already lived out my fears over and over. So what is there really to fear now? And so it feels so cheesy, but it literally feels like being reborn in a
Like
way.
a new outlook on life.
Yeah, like that, this like knowing like, well, I chose to come here and I wouldn't do that if I didn't already know that I'm going to make it through whatever happens. So whatever happens now, I've already seen that I'm going to get over it. So,
Hmm.
and the fact that like I experienced literally my worst fears ever, and I felt emotions so powerful and so devastating that I didn't know anything other than pain. Once you feel that, it's like, well, then anything that happens here on earth isn't really going to be that bad.
You've already survived the worst thing you could possibly think of, literally.
Yeah. And so it's like, well, so I will say, like, I have massive arachnophobia, like horrendous. I would gag and I have passed out before. After this happened, a spider crawled right up my leg, and at first it did surprise me, but I had like caught it on camera actually because I was talking about my near death experience, and a spider
Hmm.
crawls right up my leg, and it's big, and I flinch a little, but I go, oh no, no, thank you, and just like before, I would have literally set everything on fire. I would have
Yeah.
probably gagged multiple times, maybe puked.
Probably ran off screaming.
Yeah, and so even though I've had fear since, it's it's never going to equate to the same thing.
It's
And then
not
it
as
just,
big as it once was.
yeah, and it just goes back to, okay, I just have to be aware that any fear really is just because my human brain is a computer that's still programmed, and that's literally, this is just a glitch
Hmm.
because my actual soul and consciousness experienced this, and we're good. So
Yeah.
any fears that are like unlocked now, it's just a glitch in the program that I gotta just iron out.
So I'm curious about you remembering being born. And I had a couple questions. Do you remember, like, how many times, like, if you had to guesstimate how many past lives or how many births you've experienced, like, would you be able to kind of put a number on it?
I don't know if it's all of them because I know I had past lives that weren't on Earth, but
That's my
in this,
second question.
yeah,
Was
in
we
this
always human?
simulation, I don't. I just remember the squeezing feeling on my cheeks, and then like a flash of like fire, or what would be Neanderthal-looking tribal people, things like that. So it's just a flash, but
Yeah.
it's really like only those two. It's mostly was the sensation of being born, because I feel like once I came out, that's when the last of it kind of maybe restarted. It's like I knew I was gonna be born, but then it's like you lose it after that.
But so it's almost like a snapshot. Do you remember in that snapshot the environment or maybe what the being looked like? So, like, how did you know that it wasn't always a human life?
Um, I think it's like a knowing. I've also had Akashic readings where I didn't
Okay.
know you could have past lives that didn't stem here.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And it's just a knowing. It's also that I just remember the sensation, and I only have like 2 memories of it actually being very human. So,
I've heard that a lot. People, it's like you don't know how you know, but you just know.
yeah, yeah.
So you just knew that all of your past lives were not human.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, because I had a lot of resentment about living human life because I had a lot of resentment being on Earth. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so I've had 13 years of traditional therapy for my own trauma. But once I got my Akashic record read around the time that I like awakened in 2019, 2020, and that
Mm-hmm.
Akashic reader, who I'd love to mention at the end because she's completely transformed my life. She basically takes your Akashic record and builds a program for you out of it because that is not stuff you can do in traditional therapy. Like literally working on karma that didn't happen in this lifetime, you cannot do with a traditional counselor. You know,
Yeah.
there were feelings and trauma I had that I had nothing to trace it back to, but it's more than that, you know. Sorry, I forgot the original question of this.
It's almost like basically the information that was given to you is like it resonated and you just knew that it was accurate as far as
Yeah,
what
yeah,
told you.
yeah. So in that work, if you have really strong emotions that you really are still not finding resolution with, she's trained. She's highly trained, by the way. Some of the best teachers have trained her. She does like quantum timeline leaping. So if it
Oh,
is from
wow.
another timeline that may be merged, if it is from prior lifetimes or further back on your timeline, and so my like resentment started before this Earth timeline.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and from where I was from, that place was destroyed. And like I really didn't have any other option because this place was the closest to my place, my place.
Did she give you exact details as far as where the place was?
Yes. So my soul
Okay.
was created from a place called Hadar, which is the Beta Centauri star system, which is in the Centaurus star system. And
Oh, wow.
Hadar is the planet, essentially the star system where unconditional love stems from. So on our planet, in our star system, it was unconditional love everywhere and everything. Every being unconditionally loved every other being. But that was very polarized. Like that's a lot of light and that's imbalanced. And in the laws of the universe, there's the law of balance, there's the law of polarity, the law of duality. That kind of imbalance can't exist. And our planet was destroyed by darker beings.
Oh, wow.
And so I really had no choice to come here. It was like second best, but my consciousness knew unconditional love is not a foundation to relationships here on earth. And that is something I have never been able to accept. And my karma
Okay.
in particular has a lot to do with non-attachment because of that. Because when you come from a place where everything's unconditional love and come to a place that's very conditional, that's a big change.
Did
So
she give you details as far as the dark beings, like where they were from, or like the type of beings they were?
yeah, so I don't know if this was my Akashic reader that did or another reader who does like very specific galactic type readings. And
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was Draco's.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Draco's, not reptilians. I'm pretty sure it was Draco's. And so
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And then, other resentments that I had to do with past life stuff that also wasn't on Earth. I at one point made a huge sacrifice for my level of humanity, but it had like a permanent damage on my soul type of thing. The
Oh,
usual.
wow. The use, yeah.
The usual. And so I had a lot of
That's
resentment kind of
fantastic.
being around the humanity here on Earth, seeing how everyone is. Why don't we just unconditionally love each other?
So you had a lot of unresolved feelings from going from, I guess, what you would consider to be like a perfect place to this place.
Yeah, because existing in that level of light is amazing. Who doesn't want to live in the light? It's just not balanced. It's you
Wow.
know, it, I don't like to
So I
use the
guess they
word
had a higher
abomination, but
vibration. Yeah.
yeah, it's very, because unconditional love, although is not the highest frequency, that's authenticity. Unconditional love though is, second. So to come to a very dense place and just see the way that people treat people and not understand it and not live that way, that causes a lot of trauma, especially within relationships.
So I have a question. So post NDE, have you had any paranormal experiences or any other experiences where you've seen those shadow beings or anything like that?
I I haven't seen like shadow beings again. I have seen the only way I can describe them, and I saw them before, but now I see them almost all the time.
Hmm.
They look almost like glittery, sparkly orbs of various colors. I mostly see gold and silver and light blue.
With the naked eye?
Yes, like I can see it
Okay.
like right there, and I've started to acknowledge it. Other than that, this I came back with almost non-attachment. So, had a lot of a difficult time getting over a relationship that I had prior to this NDE. And like when I came back, it was like non-attachment. It felt very, very different. It almost felt how maybe I would have been if I didn't have very specific trauma that I had in childhood.
Hmm.
That's how it felt. It felt like that part just was gone because I didn't have the struggle with attachment or, being
The
stuck in the
fear of
past.
abandonment.
Yeah. And like with
Or
with anyone and anything. Like I had a lot of issues letting people go before. And now it was like anyone could be on the chopping block. I have a purpose. I have a mission here. I just have a job. I got a job, man. I got a job I got to get done. And they're going to keep nagging at me till I do it. And I don't got time for this. And so a lot of stuff has become so completely irrelevant since this happened.
yeah, it's like you don't sweat the small stuff.
I don't sweat like most of the stuff. I probably should care a little bit more about some of the human stuff because, you know, paying taxes is important.
Yeah.
But
No, but it's like you've experienced the true essence of your being. So it's like you're not going to benefit from, all those little, it's almost like that would be a form of resistance,
yes,
right?
yes.
And you've
And
let that, yeah.
even though I don't remember the conversation I had with God, I know what was said in my core because that's what really thrilled me to come back. I
Mm.
wanted to be here because I didn't want to die and leave my kids. But I wasn't thrilled and excited and overwhelmed with gratitude until the second time I had the white light experience and talked to God. And I feel like very focused. And that's why I feel this real sense of non attachment because it's like, I just know that none of this matters. Like, it's really like the big picture. Like that my
Yeah.
life really has nothing to do with me anymore. I don't care about being in a relationship ever again. I don't care about if I have certain social interactions. I don't care if I'm a hermit. I don't care. Like I love my kids. I will absolutely love them and take care of them. But like if they got in the way of my purpose, we'd have to have a conversation. And so I feel almost that I am so disconnected from who I was. I don't even see myself as anyone right now. I see myself as I just have a job to do. And I just know that I have to do it. And I know that it's about everyone. I just
Hmm.
kept like really kind of disconnected from the self and like that kind of like ego attachment
Hmm.
where I been lonely? Yeah, I have had, been lonely. Have I gone, missed my ex here and there a little bit, but
Hmm.
I don't really care to want those things anymore. And
Yeah, I've
so
heard a lot of people who, after having an NDE, I've heard people say that, you know, big picture or the goal is really to just kind of spread love and kindness.
Yeah, spread yes to like love and kindness, but actually it's more about like for me what I'm feeling is it is more about radical self-acceptance
Hmm.
because that gives us authenticity, which is the highest frequency, is us being authentic to who we are. Our ego is like stories we believe are us based off
Mhm.
trauma and karma. And if you take that away, we're still that individual branch of the bigger oversoul, but we are our own branch. We are uniquely, completely different as far as the experience that we're having to collect for everyone else.
Yeah, it's like as far as authenticity, I've heard people say that, um, follow what you're passionate about. That's almost like your higher self telling you, like, that's what you should be doing.
Yeah, I call it like a purpose. And I've even
Hmm.
shifted a lot of the work that I do for my job, which is one-on-one with clients in mental health, to making sure like purpose is one of our goals. Like finding a purpose. Why are you here? Because you are here for your one experience that you can provide for everyone else. And that is why every single life and every single soul is so important because no one has your experience but you. But you carry all the wisdom that you gained from this experience back to everyone else, the collective, the oversoul, and it goes all the way up to the original creator. It's like we're all collecting data. And so that being able to see that makes a lot of the human experience very obsolete because it's like, well, it's not about that, but it is about your authenticity because this is about your experience because you just existing completely as you is the point to
Mm.
have this experience because it is only in our physical body that we can actually clear karma because that requires actions and doing, not thinking and existing. So the more
I
knowledge we
like
gain,
that.
that's why we keep evolving. Like we're not who we were hundreds of years ago because we are souls that keep having human experiences and we go, you know what, this isn't working. Let's make sure we go back up. And that's why over time evolution happens. It's because we're collecting data over time and we're coming back for another experience and coming back. And it's literally like collecting data.
Also, want to just kind of, like I said, give you the opportunity, if you wanted to share any projects or anything that you're involved in. I love the idea of sharing, the information about the Akashic reading.
Yeah. So my business is called the Healing Arts Collective. I'm mostly on Instagram and TikTok. I do work in mental health. I have contracts with the county here in my state and work kind of one-on-one with clients, but I have a very holistic approach. But what I share has a lot to do with both mental health, neurodivergence, and also my, I guess, ideas of spirituality with that. I have a very psychological, this is all self growth, evolution, collective based spirituality. I strongly believe the psychology and mental health is a huge aspect of spirituality. So it's like combining the two of those, as well as sometimes just mental health stuff, things like that. Um, I do have a website in which I would offer private clients, but right now I have a waiting list with the counties. So I can't take on private clients, but I am also a reader and my readings are all self-growth based. So they're all have to do with kind of similar things that have come up in this conversation. So they're all about personal development. Are you stuck in a situation? Are you wondering what your purpose is? I have one that has to do with like the 7 pillars of manifestation. And that's basically each area in which might best serve you to become more aligned.
Is
And
this like tarot card readings?
yeah, I use tarot and oracle, and a lot of it is intuitive too, but they're all essentially mental health, personal development based. So That's a
Fantastic.
mouthful. Again, I haven't gotten those up yet because I have been so busy with my my other job. So they'll be up
I'll be
soon though.
happy to, yeah, I'll be happy to share, your Instagram or any other page in the description below, so that way people can find you.
Okay, yeah. The other two are the Akashic Reader is Seeking Divine Serendipity. Her name is Ashley Hoopler. She's also an author, so she has books out, and she has been essentially my real life spirit guide. But if
Nice.
I cannot recommend her enough. And the other reader I mentioned, her name is Shy, and she's on Etsy under Evermind Oracle. And so her readings are very in depth, also very kind of about our soul purpose and our growth here, and how to be who you are authentically, so that you can serve the collective.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think it's so important that people are having these conversations. And then also it's good to have reputable readers. There are unfortunately people who, are not authentic. So yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I really want to stress the importance, because this is a spiritual based podcast, that a lot
Mhm.
of us can get lost in the mysticism, but at the end of the day, mental health and healing is so much of what it's about. Because when we have experiences as a human, you're bound to have trauma at some point, and that collects data so that, again, back to that oversoul, we know how
Mhm.
to function best as living beings in this universe together. And so learning what works as far as healing goes helps that evolution and helps us continue to evolve to get closer and closer to being like completely in balance within the universe. Right now we're so massively imbalanced. And so we should always be evolving. It doesn't end here, and it doesn't end on this planet, and it might not even end on this universe. That's what evolution is it's continued creation, which is what God is a creator.
I want to close this out, but I want to say thank you so much for trusting me and coming on here and sharing your experience. And I think that a lot of people are going to enjoy and relate to it. It's good for people to have these conversations. So, I'm sure it's easy to kind of question yourself or, doubt these experiences. So, having someone that's had a similar experience that you can relate to is kind of like a validation that's, I would imagine, is much needed after an experience like that.
Yeah, I think it helps to just also collect more of that divine wisdom, that wisdom of experience, that wisdom of living, which only plays into our faith that, like, yes, this happened. This was my experience. You don't believe me, then that's your experience. So
All right. Well, thank you again, Nikki, and have a good evening.
thank you. You too.